work samples or on rubrics, you giving the students good feedback. So I'm going to show you how I did that. So that's in Part B, Task 3. So I took, every student got a rubric attached to their work. So I would write on the rubric, I would circle what they got for each part, and then I would write on the bottom like a little blurb. Like, you don't want to just write good job, smiley face. That's not giving the student enough feedback to understand. And even though my students were in first grade, you can read the feedback to them. It's not expecting the students to read it themselves. So, for example, in this one it says, excellent work drawing the story and the sequence of events in which they took place. I also like how you drew all the characters in the story. I noticed that you also wrote the names of the characters in your drawing, but you did not include them in your writing. So, when you're teaching, you always want to give a positive, a negative, and a positive. It's called like the hamburger, the sandwiching. So my student did things really good, but then there was something that wasn't, like, was kind of a negative, and I had to point out to them, but I put it in a way that was positive, that didn't make the student feel like they did something completely wrong. You don't want to give negative feedback, you want to keep it positive at all times. So I said, next time, remember to add all the characters' names in your writing, to add more detail to your sentences. In your writing, you mentioned the spider got 3 things. You reversed the order of next and last. The sky god got 3 things from the spider, then the people got the stories. Good effort in your writing and excellent job with your drawing. Try to write more clearly next time as well. So, as you can see, my feedback was positive. Like, even though the student may have did a few things wrong, I still said, like, good effort, like, good job. Like, you don't want to just be like, your work was really bad. That's not what you want to put in there. So, that's how you're going to show evidence of feedback with your students. And even in your commentary for the 3rd task, they're going to ask you where you cited your feedback and your evidence. And I want to point this out too. They're going to ask you to provide like a table or a chart that summarizes the learning. So you want to make sure you put, like, I took my rubric, I literally copied and pasted, and then I said, the performance as the class, like how many did they get wrong, how many did they get right. Then I put in my ESL students, the students that receive RTI, and the people that receive AIS. That's really important because EdTPA needs to see that you're meeting the all learners' needs, and the struggling readers and your ESL kids. That's really important. You need to put that evidence in there. Like my ESL student, I only had one ESL student. He was smart. He was really brilliant. He got 100 on this project. It doesn't necessarily mean that their data is going to come back bad or anything. You just want to show that they did understand it and that it was good. So again, I just put, how many points they got for each thing. So you've got to grade each kid's assessment. Don't just focus on those 3. You have to, look at everyone's and put all the data in, which does take a lot of time. It is very time consuming. But again, it's good data and it shows EdTPA, you know what you're talking about. And you have to explain it either way. You have to explain, how it all relates. I even put percentages in there. I put 9 out of 10. I just used a lot of data to back it up. So yeah, it says feedback to guide further learning. So you have to write how did you provide your evidence. So you'll choose one. So I said I wrote it directly on a separate document. And then here's all your evidence for student 2, for student 3. for student 3, he was an English language learner. Like, give a little background of your student. Yes.
I think this is a stupid question, but I see all your stuff that is literacy. Do you only submit a TPA on like teaching literacy?
That's a really good question. I'll show you right now, actually. So, is everyone in here childhood?
Yes.
Okay. So childhood education, we have to do 4 tasks. We have to do 1, 2, and 3 are for literacy, and then task 4 is math. So what happens with math is you have to do a re-engagement lesson. So that could be anything your teacher is teaching in the classroom and taught the students. It could be co-teaching. It could be a lesson you taught. It's basically whatever the students are kind of fuzzy on. Like, you need to see like what they're really not understanding, and then you have to make a re-engagement lesson about it. And your re-engagement lesson can be whole class, or it can be the 3 focus students that you need to focus in on, because they ask you to choose 3 students to focus on. I chose to do the 3 students just because I wanted to directly meet their needs in a small group, because that's how they learn better.
Brianna, I think Christine's question was whether you use social studies or just literacy. So
okay.
you can teach a unit plan on social studies,
Right.
but the focus is on literacy.
Yes, absolutely. You can do science, you can do social studies, as long as it ties into something that they're reading and they're writing, it's totally fine. I just chose literacy because in my classroom, the teacher didn't even do science or social studies. They had no time for that, but it was incorporated in the modules. So like, for example, after we did this module, they went into the human body. So that was incorporating science into an ELA module. So the modules kind of do it themselves, but absolutely, if you want to do science or social studies, that's
And many
fine.
students were doing social studies.
Yeah, for example, my last lesson, the story took place in Africa. So I related geography and social studies and history to my lesson, even though it was literacy and it was a story, it had a background. And even in my second lesson, like, the story took place in Spain. Like, I pulled up a map on the board and, I showed them the map, and that incorporates, it's actually really good to incorporate either science or social studies if you can, because it gives a little more, like, oomph to it.